Hey, it's Rich, and today I have something a little different. This is not a DIY build. This is the summary of all the things I've done with the Jeep project. So we're going to start up at the front, go through all the different things I went through, talk a little bit about how I thought it's performed, because I've had several months of all these parts in there. So let's get started. So we're going to start up front in the vehicle, and of course the most notable part is that this is a JL370 clone. I've taken all the parts that AEV Conversions has put together to make a standard Jeep Wrangler Rubicon something better. And starting at the front, the biggest thing you'll notice, of course, is the bumper. And the bumper is one of the stubbies. They offer two variants for the vehicle. The stubby is the one I like. It gives you a little bit more wheel exposure. So if you have obstacles, you want to get that tire on, it's something that allows the clearance that you don't hit the bumper. But also, one of the biggest things to look at when we come to clearance is taking a look at the bumper. And when you see the bumper itself is actually almost 2 inches higher, which means your angle of approach is going to be that much better. Couple that to the fact that this bumper, as it sits, is just under 90 pounds. It's one of the lighter bumpers you can put on the vehicle, which is part of what you're going to see as a theme as I carry out through all the build parts of the vehicle. Now, the bumper, being that boron steel, is a little thinner than most of the other bumpers you'll see out there, but its strength is much higher. It's coupled too with a couple of different things. We've got the hoop bar to help protect more of the front end, but it provides all the mounting that you're going to need for the other accessories. Now, AEV, they do provide their own lighting. I have a variety of different lights on the vehicle, but the 7000 series lights are their highest output light. And there's a couple really cool things that make that special for this particular hoop bar, and one of them is the mounting system. This is one of the few lights you'll find that actually has an isolator, and this comes from kind of like the heavy construction world. And you'll find that that isolator helps keep that vibration and bounce down, so when you're driving down those rough roads at higher speeds, you don't see the lights flickering across the front of the road. So that's a pretty huge improvement that you have, and especially because the way they mounted it, it's one of those things that's not going to take away from the frontal area of getting air around it. And that's probably something to take a look at, as you'll see everything has been pushed forward so that the air can travel around the device, still cool the light, but get to the radiator as well. So this is not really blocking the frontal area, it's allowing the air to move around and still get to the engine. Speaking also of that, you're going to have a different grille. This is 100% something I did for the aesthetic. I really enjoyed seeing like Jeep made the grills that are an offset color. I'm not really big on some of the other aftermarket styling components, but kind of as a high performance guy that's into the fast car scene too, carbon fiber is always something I've enjoyed to look, and the guys at Anderson Composites really came up with something that looks really good, and this happens to be a prototype. So I'm looking forward to seeing more parts as they come out with better things for the JL platform. Moving from that, you will see this was a factory LED package vehicle, so the frontal lights are pretty good. The AEV bumper does allow you to reintegrate the fog light. And then really wrapping up the front, it's a Jeep. I go off-roading. I got to have a winch, and the Warren winch here is a 12S. It's one of the Evo series, and I've had that on here. I haven't had to use it yet, but honestly, I hope I never have to. So continuing on with the JL370 package, the next thing I have to worry about is suspension. And I did want to put these 37-inch tires, which happen to be the Milestar Patagonia XTs. They're their new hybrid tire. And they're also a load range D instead of an E, so I do have a little bit of that extra weight savings while still having the extra performance of the Extreme or the XT tire. Those hybrid tires are a pretty cool addition we're seeing coming from an AT and having something that's not quite an MT mud. Now, to fit those 37s, I needed 2.5 inches of lift, and AEV makes the Dual Sport XP 2.5-inch lift, which includes a ton of different suspension parts, of which include basically new triple rate springs. It's going to have all the parts you need for the sway bar and other suspension components like your panhard bar, your track bar, so that we have relocation of stock parts. And the stock parts is an important part of the equation here, as we're talking about bushings, and if you want something that doesn't squeak or squawk or require the maintenance of a uniball type joint or a Heim, this is going to give you that stock-like performance as far as noise, vibration, harmonics, and all that, but giving you the enhanced geometry. Speaking to which, also, they provide a geometry correction in the front, which lowers the two front control arms and changes the triangulation. And if you've watched the video on the installation, I do have a pretty in-depth explanation of what goes on with those and how come that actually helps with things such as anti-dive, which is a big thing when you're braking with as much load as I have. And it also just makes the suspension work correctly in the sense that when you hit those bumps in the front, it helps the suspension work instead of bind. Now, the other part of the suspension that we're talking about is, of course, the Bilstein Remote Reservoir 8100 series shocks. Those are the optional upgrade. They do have the standard 5100s, which are a monotube design, but these will provide you the higher speed and sustained performance of going in off-road and basically doing the stuff I still like to do, even though I am in a Jeep, which is go a little quicker over the bumps and absorb that and still provide the dampening you want to be comfortable. Now that we're here at the back of the vehicle, the final touches are really going to be the bumper and tire carrier. Now, there's a couple different things that AEV's done on top of the fact of using their boron steel, which again is that lightweight component that has an extra strength built in, but it does have their tube structure. The tube structure allows for a little bit more protection on the side of the vehicle as you're coming down off of obstacles, but overall the bumper is mounted higher up and it is at a point where it is no longer the lowest point to improve your angle of departure. Coupling that to the effect that they do close out some parts of the fender so that none of that mud pops out from behind if the tire's tucked inside. There are a couple other elements like their old, they used to call them water tanks, which were on the bumper, were plastic elements, and they kind of help fill in the space that's not necessary to have extra metal structure, part of the whole lightweightening component. But today, with all the sensors that are in the bumper, they still keep all of those intact, but they do prevent the tanks from being used as water tanks, and they're really just going to be aesthetic components at this time. Moving on to the tire carrier, that's really the biggest part that I had seen as being an issue. One thing I wanted to do was to make sure I could carry a full-size spare. And if you're familiar with the Jeeps, you exceed about 85 pounds on that tailgate. Not only does it become very heavy, even if you put the reinforcement on it, it also is just going to be something that's going to be burdensome to the entire tailgate as far as load. So this particular tailgate has a isolator, and it's not actually mounted in carrying the weight. Their swing carries all of the weight, and it's just tied to this for easy opening. And the cool part is, since it is sustained on the bumper and it is an entirely self-sustaining component, I can carry up to a 40-inch tire if I opted not for the gas tank. But to be honest, the gas tank is probably one of those features I really enjoyed. This is 10 gallons of fuel I can carry that is discrete. It's not something that you see on the outside of the vehicle. I don't have to carry individual roto packs. I don't have to figure out how to mount the fuel. And guess what? It's got a vented cap, which means I don't have to worry about every time going up and down in altitude adjusting for the pressure in the tanks. It's just, again, so discreet and so easy, and it's 10 gallons, which makes it really a whole lot of fuel for this Jeep that has a very small gas tank. And for the most part, that really wraps up all the exterior features we've done for kind of performance and safety. And since we got it open, let's go ahead and take a look inside. So in equipping the vehicle on the outside, I had to make sure I could carry just enough gear on the inside. And part of that equation is going to be trying to take out some stuff I don't use and put in a whole lot of stuff that makes it comfortable for me to get out and go camping. The first thing I had to do, of course, was to get rid of the rear seats. I rarely carry any much more than myself in the vehicle, and the rear seats actually weigh quite a bit. I think when I did the weigh-in on the parts I removed, taking out the rear seats, mounting and brackets came in just under 100 pounds. So that's 100 pounds more stuff I could put in the back and still keep things kind of at a nominal level. Now, in getting the gear in the vehicle, one of the first concerns, of course, was having a nice, strong platform to base. And I also wanted something that I can sleep in. And one of the parts about the Jeep is that because it's an entirely enclosed area and the seats can move forward, I can sleep comfortably. Coming from the Colorado, where I was sleeping in a 5.5-foot bed, I had to sleep diagonally when I wanted to be in there. And it's still a truck bed, which meant you had a lot of air intrusion, so temperature wasn't protected. There was water, moisture, even some creepy crawlies that can make it through on some of the holes. But in here, if the stuff gets so inclement for me to be outside or camping, I can now lay down a mattress, be comfortable, and even be thermostatically controlled if I really want to turn on the heater or the air conditioning. So when I built this out, the Goose Gear Sleep package allows me to delete the rear seats and put a new panel across the back. This gives me a nice level surface across the entire area so that when I do sleep there or put large gear, it's nice and flat across the floor. The Goose Gear setup also provides you a ton of mounting areas so that I can put down different hooks to make sure I can secure the load. The first thing I wanted to do in the back, of course, was to enhance my kitchen experience, and one of the things I added was the camp kitchen. And the camp kitchen provides a couple different functions. First of all, it gives me a place to put the fridge or a cooler, and depending upon really how long I'm going, I will opt for a fridge on some of the longer features, or if it's a weekender, pop in some ice and toss it in the cooler and it's just fine. When we get into some of the other features of that, there was a spot for the bottom where to put a stove. And to be honest, I don't ever really need two burners. It's usually myself when I'm out there, or I'm in a bigger group where there's tons of people cooking. So I kind of converted that area to being additional storage. And the cool part is Goose Gear provides some pretty cool gear to convert that into a pretty effective storage area. I know I mentioned that I have a couple different sleep options, and of course sleeping inside really isn't what my entire camping experience was about. This is just kind of the emergency when those high winds come out. I do go to the desert a lot, or some of the extreme cold. It just becomes a place to go to get some shelter away from my primary sleep area, which is the GFC on the roof. If you're not familiar with GFC products, it is a all aluminum American-made product that I have on the top. This is called the Platform RTT. And I've used a unique mounting system here. Rhino Rack has something that they've put together called the Backbone system, which assists in creating some structure inside of the composite hardtop that Jeep has made that allows you to put some components on the roof. Now, their pads were designed to integrate what's called a Pioneer rack, but I wanted to keep the profile as low as possible and cut out any weight that I didn't need. So one of the things I did in this particular case was to eliminate where the mounting system was for the Pioneer rack and come up with some spacers and some new hardware to mount the GFC component to it. The beautiful part about it is GFC provides a kit that almost gives you 100% of what you need right in that kit, and all you have to do is get some additional spacers and some longer hardware, which I'll go into some more detail in a later date on exactly how that was mounted up there. But the GFC in and of itself has one other thing that none of the other companies have kind of keep in consideration, was they have a very cool ladder, and this ladder is like all ladders, kind of bulky. It's been something that bothered me since I've had it. Because it is fully removable and not part of what goes inside or used to pull out or deploy the actual tent mechanism, I had to come up with a place to store it. And if you've ever seen where they go, some people toss them in the back, they don't use space well. The biggest thing I did was I talked to the guys over at Rhino Rack, and they said they had a system coming up, and this is a new part that's on my vehicle. This happens to be a prototype again, but it's the new MOLLE system that integrates to their Backbone system. And this MOLLE system basically provides 4 bolts that mount into pre-existing holes and get you a nice mounting spot. And specifically, you can see this gives me some utility of that dead space in a Jeep between the roll cage and the window. Here, I was able to go to the hardware store and get a couple different hooks that bolted right into it. And I used an AEV strap I had laying around at the top to kind of secure it to the MOLLE panel. It's quiet, it's effective, and it keeps the ladder out of the way. Now, one of the other great features of the GFC Platform RTT is that, like I said, I did not put that Pioneer rack up there, which is a mounting system, but the GFC structure itself is its own mounting system. And if you've seen the truck in some states of the early build, I was using a Baja Designs XL linkable across the front, and man, that just dumped out so much light. Combine that with the 7000s, I've got my A-pillar lights, plus the headlights. It was actually more than I actually needed, so I took that out. But the cool part is that GFC allows for any kind of mounting extrusion system that they have to mount auxiliary parts. So whether it's lighting or other accessories, you can choose to do what you want around the side structure. In my particular case, I still wanted to have some sun protection, and the awning I chose is the Roam. It's called the ARC 270, and it's a bat wing. Unlike the previous versions I've owned that you had to roll out and put the legs down, this one deploys, it's one person, and I mean, it's the fastest deploying Roam awning that I've worked with, and it provides a great deal of shade, not only on the driver's side of the vehicle, but back in my cook area. And it's nicely tucked on the side with the bag that carries everything and comes in just above 50 pounds. And that wraps up our walkthrough of the Jeep today. And I know you see a change of venue here. Sorry about that. I did have another outro planned. Technical difficulties, what can I say? Sometimes even the best laid plans come out to being something that you can't work with. So I'm back here at the house, and again, thank you very much for watching. I know it was a little bit lengthy, but I still have so much more detail I'd like to go in. So if there's anything you saw in that video that you want me to go into more details, comment below and I'll be happy to go through that and create either a 1-minute short, or if it's a big enough thing, maybe another feature video. So thanks again for tuning in, and hope to see you on the trail.